Good morning. Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm up. My name is Susie Harris, and I'm your Sunday Service Associate. So welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are an inclusive, welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, we welcome you here. We adhere to the principles of the Unitarian Universalism, and you can find them in our hymnal. So we welcome you, and if you have any questions, you can talk to someone at the welcome table. They're happy to answer any questions. This is a great time to silence any of your phones or things like that as we prepare for our morning worship. In the spirit of hospitality, I invite you to greet someone that you did not come with this morning, however you feel comfortable.
Good morning. I am Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And this morning, at the first service, when we were getting started, Susie Harris, our worship associate, had us all greeting each other. And I asked her, so how long does this usually go? And she says, as long as you let it. And yeah, because you like each other, so that's really fun to see. So I learned I do need to ring the chime, and here we are. So I have three brief verbal announcements for you this morning, or spoken announcements. The first one is I am doing a Get to Know UU session. It's on the 22nd, thank you, of this month in the morning, and I would love it if anyone who would like would come. It's focused on welcoming folks who are new to Unitarian Universalism, but I always loved the idea of the Buddhist idea of having a beginner's mind. So if you want to come with a beginner's mind and you've been a member for 50 years, please join us. It'd be great to have you. The folks at our welcome table can get you signed up. Now, next Saturday, and I'm very excited about this, back in the swing of things, a concert free for all of us, brought by our own Daryl and Mary Courtley. And they're going to be singing music, bringing us music from the American Songbook. And then there's going to be, after that hour concert, we're just getting together because stupid COVID meant we couldn't get together for a while. So I'm just so glad to be with you and looking forward to a concert and then a party afterward, a reception, social hour. The American Songbook, I think, and I did this at the first service and it was really fun. How many of you know that song that goes, oh, we ain't got a barrel of money, maybe we're ragged and funny, but we'll travel along singing a song side by side. You guys are the funnest. Damn, they did that at the first service too. That is so cool. All right. Too fun.
Are you setting a precedent, please?
Yeah. There's that too. It's a great song. The last thing is the service auction is, I'm very excited about that. The service auction happens in November, but right now we're talking about it because we need donations for the service auction. And it might be, maybe you're going to do a meal. You can do it in your apartment if you have a table for 6 or 8, or you could do an event here at the fellowship. There's all kinds of possibilities. I, for one, have made submitted an offering of a, you can bid on sermon topic of your choice, which could be a lot of fun, and comes with lunch or dinner for 1 or 2, or if you want to bring 10 people, that would be fun. We could have a great conversation. The only thing about this particular auction item is that conclusions are not guaranteed. So. Yes, good questions. Very welcome. There's about 20, am I on? There I am. I sometimes turn the button off and don't realize I've done it, and I especially want our people in the live stream to hear. So I'm thinking about stories today. What are the stories we tell about our own lives, and how does that shape the meaning of our lives, the way we choose to be in the world? What are the stories we tell about others, and how does that affect them when we tell stories about others? Do we want to do that? And sometimes I think we tell stories about ourselves and realize maybe life's more complex than we expected. Certainly when folks come to church, they come with life stories, and we haven't begun to get to know them the first time they walk through the door. Some years ago, I began to get a bit aware of what this stories we tell. You know, when I had kids, I had the wonderful privilege to be an at-home dad for a couple of years with my 2 children. And one of the big changes I had to make that affected the story I told about myself was we bought a car called a Caravan, boxy, red family mobile, nothing like the Audi I'd had before. But I still had a music system in it because I like to listen to some music and you know, kind of, tricked out a little bit. You know, I don't even know if you know what tricked out is. You know, like where they have lights under the car and it looks like it's floating. It wasn't that tricked out. That wasn't my thing, but sounds like an alarm. I'm driving to the grocery store. So my kid's mom had gotten home from work, and I had been getting dinner ready, and I was missing an ingredient. I just wanted to run to the grocery store really quick, so I didn't have the kids with me, but I'm driving the family van. I'm getting into the car, and I turned up the sound kind of loud. There was a kind of rocking down with this one song with a great bass line to it, and I'm driving right by the front door of the grocery store to grab a parking spot right up close, and a woman is coming out from the grocery store, apparently also doing a quick errand before dinner. She was dressed because she had clearly come from work, dressed very nicely, looking really good. And she looks up, hearing the thump, thump, thump of some car. She expected it to be a tricked out lowrider or something, I don't know. And she looks up and she sees me in this family van with Cheerios in the back and car seats, and laughs. And I realized, and then she looked a little embarrassed, and I was like, I guess I'm a dad, aren't I? So, you know, as I think about stories and stories we tell ourselves and our expectations we bring as we meet others and learn their stories, that particular experience was one that got me to thinking about how do we talk about life, self, that sort of thing. It's good that we're here this morning sharing our lives in a greater story called the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Good morning and welcome. We light our chalice now. And the words of the affirmation that you say together are there on the screen. I invite you to say the words of the affirmation with me as Susie Harris lights our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and love, and to help one another. Choir.
Draw
love the different ways that narrative or storytelling can meet us in each of the individual ways we encounter the world. There's sort of the literal stories that we might tell, family histories, the stories we get, our parents may tell us when we're born. Mathematics to me tells a story. Science tells stories in a way where human beings are storytellers and story thinkers in many ways. This particular story is a story that I told and framed so that folks of all ages could participate in sort of the higher level thinking that I'm looking at in the service. And I explained to the kids at the first service that sometimes the story isn't literally true. It's not like a thing an event that happened, and yet it tells a kind of truth as we tell the story. So this is a story about a man who one day said to his son, we're going to go visit some of our cousins out in the country. They're poor, and I wanted you to see how they live compared to how we live. And as they were driving out, the son said, wow, so they're poor, and what are we, Dad? And the father said, well, I think we're well off. You might say we're rich. Oh, and the son nodded. So they got to the home of their cousins, and the son was so delighted to meet the cousins, and they just had a great time together right away, and were playing, spent the whole day together, and then at the end of the day, the father and son thanked their family and headed back to town. And as they were driving back, father said, so what did you see today? And the son said, Dad, I am so glad we went to visit our cousins. I learned so much. Why, we're just on their porch. And, when we're on our porch, there's really just the street, but if you're on their porch, there's like fields and a big horizon. And we have a pool, but it's not that big, and they have a creek, and the creek just goes on and on and on. We could play forever along the creek. And we have walls around our yard, and it protects things like my bike so it doesn't get stolen. They don't have to have a wall. They just have neighbors and friends who look after them. And we have our dog Fluffy, but they have 5 dogs. And the son said, they are so lucky. I'm really glad, Dad, you showed me what it's like to be poor. As we think about stories that we tell, how do we tell them? And what assumptions do we come in with when we use a word or we put someone into a category? I invite you to sing with me. Let's sing number 1058. Don't think we have anybody to sing to classes at this point. So, Be Ours a Religion. We have a ritual in the fellowship in which we share milestones and passages. Every week we share them, whether I've gotten a card or not, because there are even a congregation of this number of people and viewers online. those of us who have had experienced significant life passages, have gone by significant milestones in life. If you'd like to share them, the welcome table has cards, and I invite you to fill them out at the as you come in. Ushers will bring me those cards at the beginning of the service. If you're online, you can send those to me. Send them, please, by 10 o'clock on Saturday night. It gives me a chance to look at them before the service Sunday morning. My email, jmiller@muuf.org. Actually, you could send them to me too if you didn't want to fill the card out. Connections we build, the stories we tell. There are those who would hear our stories, know our stories, love us because of our stories. And those who need us to hear theirs. This ritual every week is the practice of openness and awareness as a gathered people, recognizing the importance of listening, of telling. A ritual representing a practice by which we become more ourselves, or perhaps changed, or come to understand our changes, or come to understand we wish to change. And in the silence that follows, may the complexity that is our own being and the complexity that is the being of this community find its own way of growing, changing, emerging into something more than we may be capable of imagining. For this practice and the love and care from which it emerges, we give thanks. So be it. Amen. Blessed be. I invite you to sing with me again. We'll Build a Land, number 121, if you'd like to look in the gray book, or it's here on the screen. I invite you to stand in spirit or body as you are comfortable or wish. Give us the spirit of a child. Give us the child who lives within, the child who trusts, the child who imagines, the child who sings, the child who receives without reservation, the child who gives without judgment. Give us a child's eyes, that we may receive the beauty and freshness of this day, like a sunrise. Give us a child's ears, that we may hear the music of mythical times. Give us a child's heart, that we may be filled with wonder and delight. Give us a child's faith, that we may be cured of our cynicism. Give us the spirit of a child who is not afraid to need, who is not afraid to love.
We'll take this time now to share and give our general offering. We typically split the offering 50-50 with another outreach in our community, but this week we're having a dedicated offering with 100% going to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund to support the UU congregations of Fort Myers and Venice, Florida, in the wake of Hurricane Ian. You could donate via text to give at 73256 with the keywords MUUF followed by a dollar amount. We thank you.
So some years ago, I was greeting people as they were coming to church, and a nicely dressed man and woman and 2 children came to church for the first time. I wasn't sure if it was the first time at first, but later learned that it was indeed the first time. This family, they were black folks, and when I saw them, I knew the folks in the congregation I was serving would be very happy to welcome them. And in fact, they got welcomed very eagerly. They got welcomed very eagerly. Really, they got love bombed. You know, it doesn't matter which congregation it was. What matters is we have this longing. We would love to be more widely connected. That as Unitarian Universalists, that's how we see ourselves. But you know, it's not always easy to welcome folks to a service on Sunday. You know, in these days when those large evangelical churches are losing all of their young people, their memberships are declining dramatically, and part of the reason in their case is that they chose a single story around politics, especially one that has begun to alienate their younger people. A story that not consistent, is my views anyway, and apparently what their young people think. Living a story not consistent with Christianity, maybe. Certainly not the teachings of Jesus as I read them. So can you imagine one of these young adults were to walk through the doors, the 3 sets of doors that it takes to come into this meeting room? Probably be comforting to them that you call it a meeting room these days. Sanctuary might put them off. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what is the right thing to say. What's the right thing to do? How are we supposed to be friendly? When I was a young student minister, still in the school for ministry we have out in California, I used to go around to all of the smaller congregations and do worship services, lots of opportunities for a student to do guest preaching. And I got to this one fellowship, and they had every Sunday, it was their tradition to begin the service by identifying the visitors that had come that day. This is a smaller congregation, so 30 of them, and they knew who the visitors were. They didn't even have to say, oh, so who are they? They'd say, and we have visitors today. Will you stand up and tell us your names and who you are? Pure punishment if you're an introvert. I once welcomed a member, had a new member sign the book. This was in Buffalo, New York, a congregation which was a lot more comfortable place for introverts. And she was so introverted, it had taken her 50 years to decide to join. She later told me that if anybody had asked her to stand up and introduce herself, that would have been the last time she'd come. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a Nigerian-American writer. She grew up in Nigeria, came to the United States. This is now her home. She's written books that I love. One of my favorites is her book, We Should All Be Feminists. I first saw the book, my daughter, when she was still an undergraduate about 10 years ago or so, had a stack of books that she brought home during the holidays. She was reading them, and I saw this one title. When I was a theological student, raised by Unitarian Universalists, including Unitarian Universalist women who were very, very proudly feminist and came from a long line of feminists. I even served a congregation in upstate New York where Susan B. Anthony was a member. And I always wanted to be a feminist, but when I was a theological student, it was like, no, men can't be feminists, or at least that was highly questionable. And I saw this book, We Should All Be Feminists, and I thought, ooh, is this me? And her feminism is very much like our Unitarian Universalism. Human beings should be free to be who they are. We should be allowed to tell the stories of our lives in our own ways. She has a wonderful speech on YouTube. It's not hard to find. You don't need the address of it. The YouTube speech is called "The Danger of a Single Story." The danger of a single story. And when I first saw that in 2009, shortly after it appeared on YouTube, it was for me the key to understanding this frustration I had with how is it that we greet people when they come to church? Make them feel welcome. Integrate them into the life of a congregation. You know, as we human beings, we come, as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie points out, we have more than one story. We are many stories, complex stories, conflicting stories, unfinished stories. Human beings are much harder to categorize than we sometimes would wish. So part of the reason to be thinking about how do we tell stories, how do we categorize things, as an interim minister, my hope is that about this time next year, you will be, as a congregation, all attending a workshop called Beyond Categorical Thinking. Beyond Categorical Thinking is a workshop that helps each of us understand that each of us has in our mind a picture of the ideal minister you're going to get at the end of this interim ministry. Now, what happens and what interim ministers know is that at the beginning of an interim ministry, the way the human mind works is we really haven't thought a lot about that image we have of what the next minister might be. We've made a lot of assumptions about that next minister. We've made assumptions about the best age, the best gender or gender identity, the best nationality, their physical abilities, their race, their sexual orientation. Oh, there's all kinds of ways our minds pre-identify what we think would be the ideal next minister. And what interim ministers will tell you, and I am telling you, is that this is not great for a congregation. We make categories before we even understand the newer story of a congregation, and before we understand what it is and how it is we tell and share stories, and what the congregation needs, what you need as a people. You know, we like categories. Our ancient ancestors evolved to categorize things very quickly. Oh, what is that on the ground? Is that a stick or is that a snake? And getting the right answer pretty quickly is important, maybe even a matter of life and death. But we still do this, and with good reason. I mean, if we didn't distill things into categories, we couldn't go to sleep trying to figure out what the day had meant, what we were going to eat, how we were going to do our jobs. Do we want to come to church? What happened at church? Two social scientists explain this. It's a highly cited article in the Harvard Business Review. They write, "Your mind is a categorization machine, busy all the time, taking in voluminous amounts of messy data, simplifying it, structuring it, so that you can make sense of the world." So I have two categories for drugs that I go to right away in my head, two basic assumptions. The first category is those drugs the doctor prescribes. Those are good. Those are going to heal me. And the second category is the drugs sold only for cash by that guy with no name on the street corner. I don't buy those drugs. Well, yeah, that keeps me safe, but I had several people point out at the end of the service, there's a lot more nuance in it, and that's exactly the point. Actually, some of the drugs the doctor prescribes may not be exactly as great for me as my category would allow. And, you know, sometimes there are things that we would like to use to heal ourselves that we might get from different places. There are nuances. There's more than a single story. My categories really are very limited. And when we apply such limited categories to people, we do them some harm. No one comes into the fellowship to be a category. No one comes to church to be categorized as, oh, the black family of the congregation. No one comes to be a pledge unit. We come to be human, more fully human, to have friends who know our names, who might be able to tell something about our stories, and to grow because we have earned the trust of those who are telling us their stories. And to be with people who know all of this about us, maybe even find us a little hard to love, but love us nonetheless. We said that affirmation that you all say together, that we all say together, every service. If we are truly seeking truth, helping one another, loving one another, we have to think beyond the categories. And the reality is, you push any category hard enough, it fails. It's not adequate. And if you want to live your covenant, it's best not to categorize people, nor to allow anyone to categorize you, even though we know we will do it nonetheless. But specifically and just practically speaking, when you begin to look for your next minister, you'll do some categorizing. We just have to do it. We just have to get the process done, right? And we're only human to like categories, but we have to do it with great care. So if I had begun the sermon by saying, okay, quick, I'm going to say a word, write down the image that comes to your mind. Next minister of the Morristown UU Fellowship. And you would have had an image. And for some of us, it would have been perhaps a woman, or it might have been a black person, or it might have been Clark Olson, somebody, or maybe it would have been the minister you really didn't want, like that the evangelical minister maybe you grew up with, or the priest you grew up with. There's a danger in a single story, an image like that comes immediately to mind. And so it's important for every congregation to develop that skill of listening well and being open to the complexity and even the contradictions that come with the richness of the many stories that we are and that a fellowship is. So what we want to avoid is like something that I saw 30 years ago, a minister who is gay, and when searching in search for his first congregation, in a time when it was a big deal for a congregation, one of our congregations, to be calling a minister who was gay, got this question from a search committee. So will you give only sermons about gay and lesbian issues? Of course not. A kind of a question that one would ask only if of someone because one sees them as a category. What if your search committee finds somebody who fits all of the complexities and interests you have as a congregation, and they're transgender? Will you ask them, are you going to give us sermons that aren't just about transgender issues? Hopefully that doesn't happen. Of course, by the time someone is in standing with our national association and they've done all that training, hopefully they've got a whole lot of things they want to share with you and have this wonderful conversation that is sermons with a congregation that goes back and forth. A frequently cited article in the Harvard Business Review describes the favorite category of marketing executives in the year 2006. The favorite category was the 40-year-old minivan mom. At the time, it seemed like a brilliant category, But then when some marketing executives started using it as a sort of the great category that was going to work, they found it so broad and so disconnected from actual reality that those who followed it too closely found they lost a lot of money using it. Competitors made a lot of money by not turning their customers into a single story. So Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie describes how this flaw in human thinking is misused. And this part, especially for us in the United States, is so important today. Not just in the United States, but in the world in general. We live in a time when powerful people feel free to tell the stories of other people as just a story, one story. And they tell it over and over again. They use it enough that in our minds it becomes the definitive story of the people they're trying to categorize. And that's how politics becomes polarized. It's how liberals and conservatives come to imagine each other in cartoonish and inaccurate categories. I've been very lucky and privileged to be in ministry for close to 32 years now. I've been with people at such amazing times in their lives or difficult times. And in my experience, across all these crazy polarized divisions that some leaders would create among us, the reality I've seen is that most of us are so much more alike than we are different. And when we allow each other to be more than a single story, it's so readily apparent. So this famous TED Talk that I mentioned, The Danger of a Single Story, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about a conversation she had with a college student that I think wonderfully demonstrates the illogical leaps we make from this categorical thinking and the quickness with which we want to just make things into categories. She says, "I recently spoke at an American university where a student told me that it was such a shame that Nigerian men were physical abusers like the father character in my novel. I told him I had just read an American novel titled American Psycho. And it was such a shame that all young Americans were serial murderers." Some years ago, I had some sabbatical time. I had, as an undergraduate student, a semester in Berlin, Germany, and I really had wanted to go back. I'd been in Berlin when the wall was still up. Very distinct experience to live in Berlin in those times. And in 2010, when I was there, it also was kind of a breath of fresh air to be there. They still had, at that point at least, a more grounded political debate in their country. And by 2009, it was already a bit bonkers here. There were these passionate, polite, fact-based debates between political parties that people would have on the street. I'd participate in debates between socialists and capitalists, feminists and conservatives, environmentalists and religious leaders. And in all of this, what was so wonderful about it is that it was so clear to tell the many, many good people having all these conversations and the bad guys. Maybe that's an unreasonable category, but in this case, it was pretty clear for me the category of good guys, most of us, most of the time, not all the time, is good guys like socialists and liberals and conservatives don't make each other into single stories, into categories. We debate interesting ideas. We listen to one another. We disagree with love. The bad guys, Putin, Bolsonaro, the rich guys who are paying for these bullies, these rude people who caricature others in our own country. they're using our tendency to categorize, to turn things into single stories, and doing it to harm us for their own ends. I love the civilized behavior I saw in Germany in those days. But even cultures aren't single stories. This fellowship is not a single story. There's a richness of history in this congregation, and I'm loving hearing the histories that you know, whether you've been here a year or you've been here 40 years. So when I had gone back to Germany then in 2010, I took my son, a little bit of sabbatical time, and it was really just good to be able to be in this different setting and to set aside for just a month and a half the yoke of ministry. And, I grew up in Ohio and kind of in the border between two cultures, the Midwest and Appalachian Southern Ohio. Both are cultures that are not direct, generally. Midwesterners especially like to avoid direct disagreements. Germans tend to be very direct, perhaps a bit more like the culture that we're here being in the area of metro area of New York City. Germans, if they have a disagreement, they tend to get right to the point and talk directly about it and tend not to favor a lot of emotionality in it. And in my favorite German city, in Berlin, given their history and their experiences, I observed that in Berlin, not only was there a directness, it was actually considered impolite not to get right to the point right away. Perhaps that is deeply rooted in the history they have in the past and their desire to live fully in the present. I think if people have souls, and perhaps I mean that poetically more than literally, but congregations have souls, cities have souls. And the soul of Berlin always seemed to me to be very reflective of a very rich history, more than one story, more than the story of the 1930s and 40s, certainly. And having spent some time in Berlin when the wall was up and even afterward, there was this expectation that everyone will speak truthfully and bluntly, regardless of personal views or personal style. And yet, here I am making this broad categorization about a city, and it's not so simple. I saw the soul of Berlin on a city subway train one hot afternoon that year, summer of 2010. It was blazingly hot that summer, hotter than it had ever been in recorded history of Germany. And many of the trains in Germany hadn't even been designed for the kind of temperatures, 108, 109 even, Fahrenheit. They hadn't designed their equipment to operate in those kinds of temperatures because they'd never seen it. It could be really hot on the subway. My son had come in and sat down on a subway train in downtown. We were headed back to the house where we were staying. And seated, I sat down, my son sat down, and then in front of us was a young man, and he had a water bottle, and he was drinking from the water bottle, set it on the seat in front of him. And, in Germany, you don't eat and drink on the trains. It's not a thing. But when it's 105 degrees out and the air conditioning may not be working, people bring in water bottles, and they're drinking from the water bottles, even Germans. And the young man absentmindedly set that water bottle on the seat next to him, and a woman boarded the train. She followed a bit after my son and I, and we'd sat down, and I was kind of watching and listening, and she went to take this seat next to the young man, and there's this water bottle on the seat. This Berliner, this older Berlin woman's, and the Berliners like to say we have a Berliner snarl. They're pretty direct, sometimes to the point that others feel like you're kind of snarling at them. And the woman said, "So what am I supposed to do now? Look at this. Eating and drinking on the train. It's not permitted." The young man said, "Oh, yes, the seat's free. And he scooped up the water bottle and waved to invite her to sit in the seat. The seat could be wet, she said, not sitting down. I could soil my clothes sitting there. Is this how your mother raised you, to make a mess wherever the young man is trying not to smile because he really doesn't want to go in the direction of having an argument about the water bottle in his seat. I think he knew well enough that, that's not going to go anywhere. He interrupted her as she lectured him about how to behave in the way a mother might and offered her his half-drunk bottle and then started digging for a fresh bottle and said, would you like some water? No, I don't want some water. I want you to be more polite. I have plenty. Here's another one. You could have this one. And then the train lurched as it began to go. He said, come on, it's dry. The woman took the seat and said, and it could have been wet. I'm certain your mother did teach you better. And the young man, now smiling but not showing his teeth, but just being kind, said, my mom's been working in France for 3 years. She's far away. I miss her. Yes, so far away, said the woman. My mother, she said, died 2 years ago. I miss her so much. And then suddenly these strangers in Berlin were talking about their mothers, even like they had somehow been old friends for a long time. They shared good memories about their families, how they missed their mothers. It was a great Berlin moment, beginning with that snarl and ending with a friendly, meaningful conversation about life. And yet defying even Berlin's own sense of categorizing itself. So here in religious community, this community that seeks to welcome all who come through the doors, all who seek this promise to love and help and find truth together, we're all going to come with stories. It won't be the stories, though, that unite us. It will be the way, we will be united in the way that we tell them and the way that we listen to them. And in this, we will have great power to heal, to help, to change the world. I have long loved this hymn that's in the back of our hymn book. It's number 407. We're going to sit at the welcome table. Now, one of the things I love about this, that I need to say about the hymn is one of my colleagues says, use it with great care. I loved it because when I first encountered it, it was, oh yeah, it's like being UU. We can all sit at the table. We're all welcome to it. But the folks who first sang these words and from whom this music first emerged, these were people who had been forcibly removed from their homelands and were people who had been enslaved by people like my own ancestors. Some of the verses that they would sing might be, I'm going to tell God how you treat me. I'm going to drink and never get thirsty. There was an experience behind these words and this music that is a story that was a lot greater than I understood when I first encountered this hymn. And I can tell you that if we understand this, that those who first created this music would want us to sing this music and sing it with joy and truly understand what it means to be making a welcome table. It's one of the reasons I love singing with you, because I think that's indeed exactly what you mean to do. So knowing, with gratitude toward those who gave us this music, I invite you to sing with me. We're going to sit at the welcome table. I invite you to stand in body or in spirit. go with the story of this place alive with you, the story that says we are here every week with one another, for one another, loving one another and the world around us. Take that spirit out into a world that needs it with open hearts and open minds. And know we'll be here together again, week by week. Go in peace, be in peace. Thank you.